So I just tried to reschedule a match in Hippo Cup. That is so cool. Reschedule's only closed 21 hours ago.
Aaron, we're live. Anyways, hello everyone, and welcome to Full Circle. I'm Kay, and today we're going to be going over 3WC round of 16. I think iFlame definitely has a lot to say about this round, and we're going to be doing quarterfinals predictions afterwards. And if you don't know me, I'm Kay. I'm a tournament host and a referee, so why don't we just go around introducing ourselves? We have a new person on the desk this week for analysis. It is T1G. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm T1G. I host Hippo Cup. I also thought I was muted about 30 seconds ago. Um, my bad. Anyway, yeah, that's I host tournaments and I run tournaments and I commentate stuff. Hello.
Yep. I'm iFlame. Mostly do commentary. Did commentary for Course Ace in the World Cup. But I'm ready to do some Hippo Cup scheduling, and I can't wait for you guys to do some scheduling with us.
All right, so let's move on to some analysis, some highlights from this week. We're going to be talking about some super quick matches. South Korea versus Italy. I don't think anyone was necessarily going to think that this was going to go any other way.
Yeah, this
Other,
one,
I personally don't think but I do think that we expected South Korea to win. I just didn't think that Italy was going to get a point.
yeah, I think I took Italy 6-1 because Croce and Arge are still very, very good players. And I figured they'd be good enough to at least carry one pick against South Korea. But South Korea is just so insanely stacked. Worst HR player had the top score tournament wide on 6 out of 7 maps played, aside from Free Mod 1, where he got third instead of first. So it was an insanely dominant performance from worst HR player. And I think it really just highlighted the struggle of not playing with a full 6 people on your roster. There are so many maps where Karochi or Arj could pop off and put up FCs or near FCs and looked really good individually. But a lot of times they had to not have a third player who could put up a solid score on the map. There's the No Mod 3 where I think Aaron Chino got 250k, the No Mod 4 they got 150k. And so Italy definitely could have probably taken a couple more points if they had a couple more people to fill out those skill sets outside of just Karochi and Arch having to carry everything. So we'll see if they can pull off any upsets in the lower bracket, but you do make your job significantly harder when you don't have a 6-person roster.
Yeah, I'm gonna be real. I'm just impressed that they got like 1 point, and I don't say that to be like to try to be rude. But like playing with a non-full roster and playing against a team that's one of the strongest we've ever seen in a 3WC, like getting a point against them at all is actually kind of low-key impressive. And yeah, like basically iFlame just summed it up. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about here. It's just, team gap, and if you have a full roster, maybe you have somebody who can fill some of this stuff better. Unfortunately, not the case. And South Korea, unsurprisingly, as dominant in their first matches, I think everyone expected them to be. Like I said, it's almost actually a surprise that they lost a map and didn't just win 6-0.
Yeah, I think that's about it for this. But we're going to be moving on to the next match, Ukraine versus Finland.
This is like a low-key banger. There were some super close picks in this match, which is, I don't know necessarily. I think we pretty much unanimously picked Ukraine to win this last week, if
If we could
memory
get the
Yep,
serves.
roster
everyone
from
picked Ukraine.
But I mean, there were some super close maps in this matchup, and I think Finland really acquitted themselves well here. Getting 3 points against a team that's as strong as this Ukraine roster is, especially at this level of play. Pretty impressive. They had some good scores even on maps that they lost, like Desku FCing Hard Rock 1, for instance, and then backing that up with another near FC on DT3. Like they had some super good scores. I was pretty impressed to see the results that Finland got out of this match. I had this pegged as more of like a 6-1, 6-2 type of scenario. But they had this super close Hard Rock 1 that Ukraine barely escaped with. They had a DT3 that ended in like a spin to win. They triple FC'd, I believe, for Finland. The Fremod 1 or nearly triple FC'd, nearly triple FC'd. So yeah, I take away from this, Ukraine maybe not quite up to the level we anticipated, but Finland performed, I think, better than expectations would have led us to believe out of them. So really good stuff from this match. I mean, it was a very tightly contested 6-3. So one of those kind of like I said, like low key bangers of a match that we saw in the first weekend.
Yeah, it's great to see. You mentioned those two close points that were won by Ukraine. It very easily could have gone to tiebreaker if Finland had a little bit more luck. Ukraine obviously had some incredible scores as well. Dench especially continued the form from OWC. I feel like Dench is really starting to cement himself as one of the stronger open rank tournament players. And uh, I mean, this is 3WC, so not quite open rank, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what Dench can do maybe in some of the bigger open rank tournaments in the future, because not just 3WC, but going back to OWC, had some of the strongest performances in the entire tournament and has continued that so far.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think we're
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I think Ukraine, really showing what they're made of, especially in this 3WC. I mean, we saw them during OWC, of course, and I think, this is where, of course, that as we said last week, Ukraine's making their statement, like we are here to play, and, against Finland, they're really, really showing it.
Yeah, to me, what it came down to is that Finland just doesn't quite have the depth to compete with this Ukrainian roster. You obviously have Dench as the main carry, but then you have Raf GPO and Roman who can both play most maps to a fairly high level between the two of them. And those three were able to cover almost every skill set, whereas Finland doesn't have quite that same depth, and it feels like they were lacking that big carry that Ukraine had. So it was close, but Finland needs a little bit more depth and a little bit more carry potential.
Yeah, but they're still super close. So I think
Mhm.
that's a team that could. And actually, I didn't even. I don't know that this was intentional, but the losers and the winners that we just talked about are playing each other. So we'll get to some predictions on them later on. But that's kind of funny that saying some similar things about these guys, and we're seeing them in losers round one this weekend.
Okay. And with that being said, we're going to switch over to the Philippines versus Canada. And I think other than our token Canadians, last week we all pretty much said that the Philippines were going to win. Of course, iFlame got to rep your home country, am I right?
Yeah, as a Canadian, I'm obligated to predict Canada, but this was 6-2. It went exactly as everybody expected. Canada had some good team scores, but um, Nathan Ram and Yok were just insane as expected. They were number 2 and number 4 individual, which is really great to see from them. I think Philippines were definitely one of the best performing teams across the tournament, as you'd expect from. But I think they even outperformed their seed a little bit this week. We'll see how much that matters later on, since it is still early stages. But I think the score could have been a little bit closer. Players like Pikapon, Genderbender also look great for Canada, being 5th and 11th individually. But Canada, they just don't have the depth either, right? They do have those two core players that looked very good. But they didn't really have a third player on a lot of the maps. They don't really have anyone who was kind of that hard carry who could consistently FC most things like Nathan Ram and Hyok. So very much to be expected.
Yeah, I think for Canada, they, as I think we kind of anticipated, like they fall into the like decent to good, not great territory. They don't have really a big consistent carry player, and that hurts you a lot against some of these teams. I think the question that I'm going to be asking later of this regarding this match, like especially as we go on into this tournament, like you said, Philippines, who their third is going to be for stuff. as we get into the later rounds and the scaling amps up, because you've got Nathan Ram who's playing insane, you've got Hyuk who's playing insane, but like they've had some occasions in this match where their third player really fell off hard. It goes down to 523k on Ramu on Hidden One, goes down to 571k on Mio Milo on DT1. You know, there's like 300,000 point drop offs on some of these players, and this is only the first pool of the bracket stage, right? So you've got two incredible players, but is that going to be enough when you're matching up against teams, you know, like South Korea, for instance, that are so insanely strong? I don't know. You know, it's a good performance. Obviously, Philippines won out, did what they needed to do in this particular match, and that's all well and good. But if you're the Philippines in this particular tournament, I think you're super forward looking because you've got such strong players leading the way. And forward looking against like South Korea, for instance, is sketchy for about anyone. But I don't know at what point, you know, does getting third player start to hurt you more than it did in this match? That's going to be their question to answer as we move on through the tournament.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there. And I mean, to just kind of add on to that quickly, I mentioned their top two, Nathan Ram and Hyuk, were second and fourth individual. Their third best player was Ramu at 51st individual out of 62 players. So the third player syndrome might start to trouble them a little bit sooner than a lot of people expect.
Yeah, I think that overall the Philippines did a really, really good Bangkok performance. Not to say that Canada didn't, put up a good fight, but we're going to be moving on to the next match. We're going to be going over to USA versus Chile. I have a few words about this match. I have a few words, okay? Chile got a very early 0-2 lead, which kind of replicated how the United States had dropped 2 points against Israel in round of 32 during OWC, right? And we were just scratching our heads, wondering what the hell happened. As the match progressed, Chile was eventually still up by 2 points, and the match turned into a 4-2 scenario. That was a moment.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I guess there's nothing more to add there. Yeah, it was definitely a little bit disappointing if you're a United States fan. It didn't. I think Chile played slightly better than their seed showed, but it definitely felt like much more of a United States underperformance than a Chile overperformance. You know, they look good on DTs, but they won their last pick by 70,000 points. We very nearly went to tiebreaker, at which point, who knows what could have happened, right? Chile were largely being carried by Suntan and Gonza, and they really, really struggled with that third player for a lot of the match. And up against stronger teams, right? You're not going to have that advantage of the other team having third player issues. So the US has historically in OWC had a history of being inconsistent in the early rounds. And I think that's fine when when you know you're gonna outscale every single team by the end of the tournament. But in a tournament like 3WC, right, where you have South Korea to contend with at the end, who arguably scales a fair bit better with worst HR player, you have to shore up some of those consistency issues because assuming they're going to the grand finals, which I think most people expect them to, you really can't afford to have those inconsistent performances. And I think you'd like to see players like Decade and Kama especially step up more into the later rounds.
I think this kind of showed how, never to underestimate your opponents in at least the first round of the tournament, because they ended that match 6-4. So the United States eventually ended up, winning that match 6-4, but it was looking really, really scary for a little bit as the match Chile got a three-way on DT3, despite, and, Hidden 2 was basically that deciding battle, and it was still really, really close. And, of course, not to say that the United States didn't do good. They put up great scores on Noma 3 and DT3 in that match. And there was one player missing, Taquito. Taquito didn't show up, he didn't play, and he wasn't online for the entirety of the match. So maybe he was and the match in question actually had a last minute reschedule, I guess because something had come up for one of their players. So my assumption is that maybe it was for Taquito. But I mean, Taquito's a pretty good player. He's pretty important to the United States roster. So despite, playing a match without him, it kind of shows that they need to make sure that every single member is at the match, every single member is present and locked in, because it would be quite the shame if the United States tried to do that again and they ended up getting knocked down into losers bracket.
If the United States has this like weird history of seemingly underestimating teams in early rounds in different country-based tournaments. We've seen them drop like surprising points to teams in OWC and stuff, but I think the asterisk on this for me, and I don't want to take away from the performance of Chile, but the asterisk on this for me really is the absence of Taquito, because I think it's pretty safe to say like he is the best player on this team overall, right? So not having him is kind of a big deal. So while I was impressed by the performance of Chile regardless, you have to wonder what would have happened if the United States had Taquito there. But shout out to Chile for coming out and not being afraid to take a shot at a team that was obviously the massive favorites in this match. Some pretty impressive stuff that they were able to put forth, and I want to know what we see out of the United States when they actually have their full roster. That's going to be the big question.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see during their round of their quarterfinals predictions, mainly because I just think that I would hope that they would all have their roster then. But we're gonna be moving on to the match that iFlame can definitely shill over: Sweden versus the Russian Federation. iFlame, why don't you take it away?
Oh boy.
Look, we had 5 predictions last week. 4 of them were Russia, and I took Sweden 6-5. I don't know if anyone has seen the match results, but it was 6-5 for Sweden. I think bans were good for both teams, and ultimately, Skilla was the best player in that match, and I think that is what Sweden was relying on, right? I think it's fair to say Russia has a more well-rounded team, but Skilla, even looking back to OWC, played incredibly well the whole tournament, and it seems to have translated so far to 3WC. Skill, I think, was 8th individual off the top of my head, played insanely well. And the other big thing that stood out to me is that Russia did very, very well on the maps they were good on, right? Like the DTs, but on the maps they were less comfortable on, they had some of the worst team scores in the tournament, looking at the Nomad 2, Nomad 4, the Hidden 1. And that allowed Skilla to pretty much solo carry, right? And it almost feels like Russia has over-indexed into certain skill sets. Like they're obviously one of the best DT speed teams in the entire tournament, which against stronger teams on paper, that's actually a positive to me because you're going to have dedicated maps that you should be able to win. But against weaker teams, it means you're going to struggle a lot more to beat some of those maps that aren't necessarily in their skill set. And all it takes is one player on the other team who's good at them to take the point. I think that's mostly what happened here. Also, the tiebreaker FC from Skilla was pretty insane. So just well played to Sweden.
Yeah, I don't know.
Only
go ahead.
I was like only upset in the week, and it came about with a tiebreaker FC. Like, I don't know, man. That's so hype. It's really just surprising to me to see Russia lose an early round because, like we were talking about last week on the predictions, right? Like, you just don't see that happen. You almost always see them get through to like winners, quarters, winners, semis in basically every international tournament that they're in. But man, it's just like this super back and forth all the way through, and then tiebreaker deciding it. I don't know what more you could really ask for out of an early round match. This is just a really cool one to see. I think regardless of the outcome, it was a great match, and very happy to see this sort of outcome regardless of who won. Just that sort of competitiveness is really fun.
Dude, I talked about Skilla, how Skilla was the fucking goat, right? But I was really afraid of how the rest of Sweden would be able to support that. And they shut me up, bro. They showed up. They showed up and did business for real. Like, let's talk about how God, I always mispronounce his name, but Zims? Yeah, Zinks.
I don't know either. I have no
Yeah,
idea.
but he put up some really good scores in that, and of course, Skilla's TBFC. It's it was definitely something, and, what a way to end the match like that on a TBFC, like, not even just winning the TB, but
Right.
to FC it, right? It is a bit of a shame that Russia got knocked down to losers, but, I mean, it had to be someone, right? But I think with that being said, we are going to close out our round of 16 recap. We're going to be bringing 2 additional people for predictions as always. We are 5 on the desk for that. Dio, who you saw last week on our qualifiers recap, and we are going to be bringing in someone from down under. Vorty
Hello.
from Australia. Hello, guys.
Yo, what's up?
Hello. I'm ready
All
for
right, so
more predictions. I'm ready for more
ready for more
screenshots.
hot
Ready for more
takes?
predictions to go
Oh.
perfectly.
Yes,
Not getting a
absolutely
single one
perfectly.
wrong.
No mistakes. We do a clean 5-0 agreement on every single one. It all
Oh,
goes
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
Flawless.
it.
Okay.
Alright.
Last
Alright,
week,
everybody.
except for the Canada prediction, which doesn't count, I was
Okay, okay.
100%. So
That's true. That's true.
That's true. You're the only person that's 100%, I guess.
Damn.
Let's go.
Well, no one was 100%. We had 2 people go Canada last week.
Oh, actually,
Yeah,
And
it's true. I thought
if you
my
didn't go
Canada
Canada, you
was
went
worth
I
Russia
had
instead
to.
of
I had
Sweden.
to.
So
Had no
GG.
choice.
Anyways.
It's not fair.
Yeah, first match of the day. That's going to be Sunday at 15 UTC, I believe. We're going to be having our first losers bracket match, Italy versus Finland. And based on their performance last week, I think I might give it to Italy. I think I'm going to give it to Italy 6-4.
Really?
I think that Arj and Kurochi are great players, and despite, Finland having a bunch of very seasoned tournament players, I think that the overall difficulty of the pool really favors Italy here.
Well, I think Italy has 3 really good players. I think Arj, Kurochi, and I think was it Chihuahua? I think played every single map, and I do think that is going to hurt when they have to play skill sets where they're not all 3 aligned on. I think Finland has a pretty distinct tapping advantage, so they'll have at least probably 2 pretty solid picks if Italy bans out one of the tapping maps. That's kind of 2 picks down the drain for Italy. But then I think after that, Finland just has a little bit more depth. They had quite a good amount of good scores on a decent amount of the matchups. So, I mean, I think Italy can 100% get several points just off the back of Arj, Kurochi, and Arancino being 3 really, really good players. But I do think not having a full, comfy 6-man roster is going to really hurt them, and that's going to be the deciding factor that I think will lead Finland to taking it.
I don't know. I'm really torn in this matchup. I think this is going to be a really close match. I don't know how to call this one. There's the 3-person core of Arj, Arancino, and Kurochi for Italy is really, really good. But Finland does have more depth. I think the pool this week actually favors Finland a little bit more. You have Speed Nomad, you have 3 Speed DTs. The Freemod 1, Freemod 2 are both 200 BPM plus, and the anti-mod pick is also a little higher BPM. I think one of the things that gave Italy a pretty good time on some of the maps last week is a lot of their better scores were on tapping maps. On the
I was gonna say not
tapping maps. Yeah, I mean they had a good score on the DT1, bad score on some of the gimmick stuff. They didn't really play a lot of the tapping maps. If I'm seeing this right, they just didn't play any of them.
Yeah, Italy played DT1. They didn't play.
That's kind of it.
They didn't play the Nomad tapping map. They didn't play the DT tapping maps. They didn't play the Freemod tapping map.
Yeah, Finland got number 4, number 3 on the 2 DT tapping maps. I don't know. I feel like they'll probably have a pretty good time with that, with a slightly higher BPM average pool this week. I think it's still completely up in the air. I think if it goes to tiebreaker, even the tiebreaker is kind of Finland favored. No, it's angry for this week.
Yeah,
I don't know.
My goodness.
This is kind of the Finland pool of all time for this matchup.
BM or the Foxy Grandpa one? No, it's the Skarsnik one. Okay.
Yeah, this is kind of the Finland pool of all time. I'm gonna give it Finland 6. 5, 6-4.
TB?
I don't know. I think it could be. I think this match is going to be really close. The 3-man core, or 3-person core for Italy is really strong, but I kind of agree with the depth on the Finland roster a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to agree with Theo that the pool definitely favors Finland to me. I don't think it's going to go to tiebreaker. I'm going to take Finland 6-3. If you actually look at the scores from last week, Italy had some of the lowest team scores tournament-wide on quite a number of maps. I think they are going to get some points off of just Kurochi and Arch popping off on some mechanics picks, but ultimately Finland has more depth, like you mentioned. They've been more consistent. The pool, I don't think, is nearly hard enough this week that Kurochi and Arch can just solo carry everything. So I think it. I would take 6-3, but I could easily see it being something like 6-2, even 6-1, depending on how Italy shows up on the day.
Yeah, I gotta just go with what you guys have been saying here, basically, which is, I think Italy's lack of depth and just kind of the style of this pool, I think, is a little bit too much for them in this matchup. I mean, like, there's a reason you end up only being the 16 seed. Like, it wouldn't be, it's not like it's an upset for Finland to win this. I think they're the favorites, and I think there's a good reason for that.
Your audio cut out for half of that.
No,
Oh, that's awesome.
that's a you issue. That was not.
I was gonna say,
okay.
That is a iFlame issue. I heard it
Alright,
loud and clear, buddy.
But yeah, I'm just gonna route it out there. Like, Finland, I think, is just the superior team. I think Italy probably does get a couple points because they do have Kurochi and Arj, who are very, very good, and they'll find one of Arancino or Ruscio to fill in. But I think the lack of depth of only having 4 players really will continue to hurt, and I think this is probably 6-2, 6-3, something along those lines, much like people have already been saying.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna be in the iFlame position of last week where I'm voting Italy. So Arj, Kurochi, you're hearing it right now. I'm gonna tell you how to win, okay?
This is how Italy can win.
This is how Italy can win, alright? You guys play the mental game against Finland, okay? And that's how you guys win. I don't know how you're gonna do it, but I hope you guys win.
See, I don't think you can call this the iFlame position because you see, I was right about my prediction, and you won't be. So,
oh
I
my
don't know.
goodness, it hurt me like that.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna be moving on to our next losers bracket match. It's gonna be Indonesia versus Poland. That's gonna be Saturday at 15 UTC. Okay, I don't want to start this because I started the last one, so we're gonna go Vordy.
All right, so I think what Dia mentioned before, I think, is gonna be a factor in all of these matchups, which is, I think the pool is interesting because it has a decent amount of tapping. Obviously, other than the 3 like tapping overall maps, you also have a lot of skill sets that have elements of tapping, like the free mod 1, the DT2, which isn't pure tapping, and it's like sort of high AR reading, but it also has a decent amount of tapping, and a DT1 is obviously pretty fast. So fast teams are going to feel pretty good. There's also a decent amount of gimmick in the no mods, in the hiddens, obviously, and even like Hard Rock 1 technically in Free Mod 3. But I think teams, if a team is distinctly faster than the opponent, I think it's going to be like a pretty strong suit for them. And I do think Poland overall just a little bit more comfortable on the speed. But also, Indo has a decent amount to trade back. I think this is going to be a very close matchup. I think this is going to be one of the closest ones. Obviously, super close in seeding, 12 versus 13. It's also funny when Poland and Indo are right next to each other on the sheet because it's just the same flag flip.
It's just flipped upside down. Yeah,
it's nuts.
It's rough.
Yeah, I don't know. This is going to be a tough one. I think this is an easy one to get wrong, but I think, just also based on last week's scores, I want to give it to Poland. Like, it's going to be like Poland 6-4, 6-5. I don't think this is going to be a close. It's not going to be a one-sided match at all. But I do think Poland has more convincing picks just off tapping. And I do think Indo's probably going to go like Hidden 2, No Mod 1 if they're unbanned. It was Hidden 2 was banned against them last time because they do have a very good low AR team, and they'll have No Mod 1 afterwards. But that's only one real low AR pick. Afterwards, you're just going into more gimmicky patterns. But I think Poland has a decent shot at breakpointing. Like, I think Poland has a better shot at breakpointing on gimmick than Indo has on breakpointing Poland on tapping. And I think that's going to be the main factor here. and also angry for if it does go to tiebreaker. I think that just favors Poland. So yeah, I'm gonna give it Poland like 6-4, 6-5.
I'm also gonna give it to Poland, I think. Yeah, I think after what dude, Vorty just came out with all the points. I'm just gonna go Poland. The ship has sailed.
Vorty came out with the points, but I just kind of disagree. Like, I don't think that this pool is tapping favored in a way that favors Poland over Indonesia. You look at the scores that Indonesia got last week and the scores they were getting in qualifiers. Put curse on you. Yeah, they had a really bad score. They got 1 mil team score combined. Black Rose, they got like 1.5 mil team score combined. It was just Skydiver was the only player who could actually play that. But then they were number 1 on the DT3 last weekend. So their like high AR DT reading, their ability to play DT gimmick maps is still pretty good overall. And they can probably still play stuff like the DT2 in this pool. Because, yeah, there's a tapping requirement, sure, but it's not like a pure DT stamina map, right? That's just not the case anymore. And the free mod stream pick is no longer 210 BPM death streams. There's some 200 BPM streams in free mod, and then it's like 240 bursts in no mod with Reviver. I think the speed picks this weekend are better for Indonesia than they were last weekend because it's not so much stamina focused anymore as it is more like burst focused, if that makes sense. Even on Barbados last weekend, yeah, they were still worse than Poland on the map, but it was a less than 200,000 score difference in 3v3, which is not huge. And a lot of the other picks in the pool are still pretty good for Indonesia. I think this is still going to be really close. Like, I don't think this is necessarily favored toward either of these teams, but I don't think this is like flat out favored toward either of them. If I had to give it to one of these teams, I would probably go with... Am I giving this to Indonesia? I'm going to give it to the Dito carry. I'll say Dito carries hard in this match. The consistency in qualifiers to get Dito and... who is that? They have the 2 VTubers getting good scores on the AR8 and qualifiers, just number 5 overall run in the entire qualifiers among all teams with 2 runs. The ability to outperform Poland on some of the gimmickier maps, like the Hard Rock 2 in qualifiers. I think they can probably take it. If it does go to tiebreaker, I think Poland's going to have a pretty good time with that. But I think they can maybe take a break point on one of the speed picks, like the DT2, and from there they can probably win a lot of the other more gimmick-focused picks in the pool.
I think I'm going to have to take Poland, not because I think the pool favors them. I think they are just the slightly better team. I feel like their skill cap as a team is slightly higher. I mean, honestly, both of these teams had really rough scores last week outside of that one DT top score from Indonesia. But if you're Poland, you can just ban that out, right? Indonesia has been very good at the low AR picks, but Poland looked great on the low AR last week as well. And I think, again, similar to Italy, only having 4 players is going to hurt Indonesia a lot, especially as we get later into the tournament. I do think it will be very close. I could very easily see it going either way. But if I had to pick one, I feel like I would take Poland 6-4.
Oh, apparently I already predicted Indonesia.
You're stuck now.
I guess I'm
You're
stuck
in here with me.
Unfortunately, yeah, we have this nice little pattern, which is kind of cool. Unfortunately, I was planning on picking Poland, so I'm sorry for the pattern, but I'm kind of going Poland here. And, you know, going last leaves me not much to say on this. It's kind of just, hey, I'm agreeing with the people who have picked Poland already. But it's the same sort of thing as with Italy. Like, you really do kind of shoot yourself in the foot in terms of depth by only picking 4 players instead of bringing 6. Like, it's unfortunate, but that is just kind of the way of things. And I think, you know, Poland, I think it was, what did we say? It was Poland 4-1 on Maps in Common last week. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that was with, I mean, some, like, okay scores and some very good scores, so it's a little split.
They're pretty bad scores.
But there's also some not
relatively
so
bad
great
scores.
Yeah, there's also some not. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
both teams had some not so great scores, right? They're 9th and 10th
Yeah.
on Mud 2. They're
Yeah.
7th and 10th on DT2. They're 9th and 10th on Hard Rock 1. Like, definitely these were teams that struggled a bit last week. But I think just having 6 players, you know, if you're on a similar level already, just pick the team that actually has a full roster, man. I'm sorry.
Hey, I picked Italy.
Oh wow.
What I will also say about because Indo popped off on DT3 last week, and I was like, oh, DT3 they're probably nuts at like high AR. They can probably like do really well in the DT1. Then they got 28th on DT1 in quals. So that's a bit doesn't speak the best. And also the DT2 this week, it's high AR, but I think the added tapping element makes it a worse comparative pick for them compared to the pure aim that was the T Swizzle map last weekend. So it's gonna be a tough one, but
What
yeah,
now?
regardless, I think T Swizzle.
The T
I
Swizzle.
think-
Yeah,
I think it will be
I said what he said.
It's my favorite map.
All right, on to the
All
next
right.
one.
Yeah, on to the next one. We're gonna be going Chile versus Russia. That is gonna be at Saturday 16 UTC. And I feel I have a if Dio's Chile is my Russian Federation, then what happens here?
Russia wins this. That's
So
what
if
happens here.
Dio's Chile is my Russian
Correct.
Federation, you know, OWC versus 3WC. So what how does that work out here? What's the math on that?
I mean, the math is you have 15 seed and you have 7 seed.
Yeah.
And if my math is correct, that's an 8 seed difference. And I think Chile is, I mean, on top of that, I think Russia is just a really bad matchup for Chile. To me, they both feel like very strong DT teams, but Russia is obviously one of the most stacked DT teams in the tournament, where Chile would normally look to pick and abuse DTs as much as possible. That's not something you can do against Russia. I think between Suntan and Gonza, they have a very strong 2 players, but like we mentioned earlier in the recap section, they really struggle with their third player, their third player being like number 51 individual out of 62 players. And I think that's going to hurt them really badly, especially against a team like Russia, who has a fair bit of depth to their roster, right? They have a number of players who can all put up good scores on the map. And so I'm going to have to say Russia 6-2. I don't think it's going to be that close. And I do think the pool favors Russia a little bit as well.
You know what's interesting is that like they were actually super close on maps in common. Like what is this like 4-3 or 3 or something?
It's
like
4-3 Chile in
Yeah,
maps in common last weekend.
4-3 Chile based on last week's maps in common, which is wildly not at all what I would have expected. But I think Chile is, in a weird sort of way, arguably the better early round team, especially the way that like Yunha and Suntan were playing. Those guys really, really popped off in the first round. And Nakore had some super good maps. So like Chile had multiple good performances from a bunch of their players. But I think as the pool gets harder, this matchup gets worse for Chile because they fall off faster. And I think Russia, if they take it seriously, like their scaling is just way better, and this pool is a little bit harder. I think favors them a little bit more. I think this is another one where it could be a surprisingly close, much like Chile versus the United States was. But I think I favor Russia by like 6-4. Like this is a close one. But I think
Right,
it's
what
Russia.
about you, Dio?
Hold on, I need to look at something else real quick. Somebody else.
All right,
Alright.
Gordy.
Oh,
All
I
right,
I need to
Gordy.
look at the
Yeah,
qual scores.
I think I agree with Tig in the sense that I think based on how well Chile played last weekend, I think this will be a little bit closer. I will still give it to Russia just because I do think they're the better scaling team. Chile didn't perform that great on the quals, which I do think is if the difficulty of quals is what gave them a tough time, this pool being a bit closer to the quals difficulty might hit them in the scaling pretty bad. But Chile had quite a decent amount of good scores. I think Chile can win a lot of the gimmickier picks if they play like they did last weekend. But I think on the majority of the mechanics picks, Russia should be favored. And I think once the pool gets deeper, Russia should have more picks by the end. And obviously, I also do think Russia maybe could have played a little bit better up against Sweden. So they have some really good players, really high skill cap mechanics players. So I think I'll give it to Russia, but I do think it'll actually be surprisingly close, especially for like a 7v15 matchup. I think it could definitely go 6-4, maybe even 6-5. Once again, it's another situation where I do think I favor Russia if it goes to tiebreaker, but potentially could be pretty close.
Here's how Chile can still win.
Oh my goodness.
My favorite.
Oh no. Oh no, guys.
This is not even troll. If you look at the qualifier scores, you look just at the scores from Chile and Russia, there's a really clear reason why Chile's qualifying placement was so much lower than Russia's, and that reason is the Hard Rock pool. Russia was like 14 and 18 on Hard Rock 1, Chile was 28 and 49. Russia was 4 and 29 on Hard Rock 2, Chile was 44 and 51. Kind of similar thing for DT1, although less of a gap between the scores. But on a lot of the other maps, Chile actually has either very competitive or better scores than Russia on a lot of the maps, including something that we kind of saw last week as a potential strength for Russia, which is the speed maps. Both in qualifiers, with the qualifiers DT2, they had 2 better team scores than both of Russia's team scores on that map. And they had a better score on critical cannonball in the Nomad pool as well. So even like Nomad streams are still really good for Chile. They had competitive scores on Nomad aim and alt finger control stuff. And then last weekend, it was 4 for 3 on shared maps for Chile. 2 of those 4 were speed maps. Chile was the number 1 team on the DT2 last weekend, the speed DT, and they were the number 2 team in the tournament on the Nomad speed map last weekend in Barbados and Nomad. And they had overall higher average placements across every map in the pool last weekend. The single worst map that they had was Fremod 1, where they were number 12. But every other map that they played, I think they were top 6 on literally every other map that they played in the pool last weekend. I'm just going to double check that. Yeah, they were top 6 on literally every map that they played besides the Fremod 1. And you can't say that about Russia. I think the higher variance in the scores from Russia is going to lead to Chile being able to early stage them. And this is not too hard of a pool where that's out of the question yet.
So, like, my question about this, sorry to like jump in here, is like, did Chile overperform last week, or was that their average? And did Russia underperform last week, or was that their average?
I think it doesn't even matter, because even if you look at the scores from qualifiers, you could probably still make the argument for Chile to win. But I think last weekend is probably a little bit of both. I think Russia probably had just a bad weekend. But I also think Russia still had a lot of variance in qualifiers. Like if you look at some of their scores, a lot of their scores were like worse than both of Chile's in the qualifiers. So I think there's just more variance to the Russian team. And you see that in a lot of World Cups. Like even in the World Cup last year, there's just really high variance to a lot of their scores in the qualifiers. And I think they're a team that benefits a lot from 2 runs.
Fair.
All right. This is really hard. I really, really want to go for Chile. However, I do think that they like hella overperformed. I feel like some scores, they definitely were just like that was their fucking week. They locked in. And I really want to choose Russia. However, I'm just gonna go with my gut, and I'm based on Dio convinced me, and I'm just gonna go with Vamos Chile. I'm gonna go with
Vamos
Chile.
It's over for
If
Chile.
Dio, if Dio trusts his Chile, then I will too. We were going Chile.
Well, we know.
Oh god, this is gonna be a hot screenshot. Ugh.
This is gonna be fun.
I mean,
all right.
I think we're all in agreement that, like, at worst, this is going to be a competitive match. Like, regardless.
I think it's gonna go.
I think
it's gonna go 6-4. I think it's gonna go 6-4.
Yeah. And I don't know, I still go back to the little bit of an asterisk I put on Chile going 6-4 against the United States, because, like, how many of these maps would United States... I mean, I know, you can only play the who's in front of you, but, like, how many of these maps would United States have either won or at least, like, likely, if they had Taquito instead of whoever was their third for them? But, I mean, the scores are still the same in a vacuum, so that part doesn't really matter anyway.
Yep.
Yeah. We are going to be moving on to our next match, the last of the losers bracket matches. That is going to be France versus Canada, Saturday 19 UTC. I'm just going to let the Canadians open this one. Dio, may you do the honors, sir.
Sure. I think just looking at the scores from both the qualifiers and last week, there's just better head-to-heads for Canada. They're 3-for-1 on head-to-heads. The pool is speedier this week. Canada is head-to-head winning every speed map against France in both qualifiers and round of 16. And they also have generally better scores even on low AR and low AR hidden than France does, just looking at the qualifier scores. I think if there's anywhere that France can try to take points, it's going to be on aim mechanics, alt, and hard rock. But even then, Canada still has a good enough roster to be competitive on those. So I think this is going to be a win for Canada. I think it's still going to be pretty close because I don't think Canada can really take break points against France, right? I think they're still going to lose a lot of like Nomad Aim, for example. Although last week they win the Nomad Aim head-to-head by like a 1.2 million score, so maybe they do take breakpoints. But I think it's still going to be like 6-3, 6-4. Like I still think there are going to be points for France, but I think this is just a Canada favored matchup on paper because of the skill sets these teams are good at. And I think it's just a bad pool for France this weekend.
Yeah, I have to agree. I'm going to take Canada as well. And, this week it's not a Canada bias prediction. I do genuinely think they are the stronger team. I mean, I think Dio covered most of it, right?
Yeah, that's a no bias thing. I'm literally just looking at the scores from qualifiers and round of 16.
I mean, France had some of the lowest scores across the tournament. I mean, looking at their seed, it makes sense. They did have a couple of good scores, but Canada, it felt like, did have some genuinely impressive team scores. Second on the Nomad 1, fourth on the Nomad 2, third on the Nomad 4, and like you said, some good DT performances as well. And unless France pops off really hard, I don't think they're going to be able to match. It doesn't feel like they really have any carry player, or as we've seen both Peekapon and Genderbender playing really well last week. And if we see similar levels of performance from both teams, I think it's probably going to be something like 6-2 Canada.
Yeah, I would probably also agree. I think Canada is just favored here. I don't think France has that many options that they can pick into that are going to be too strong. They'll have a few, but I think it's going to run out pretty fast. They can go into hard rock. Obviously, they did very, very well on the hard rock 1 in qualies. So the more similar map to hard rock 1 in this pool is the hard rock 2 for like pure mechanics. The hard rock 1 is a little bit more gimmicky and ulti, which I think actually does favor some of Canada's teammates if they're comfortable on the AR10. And yeah, I think Canada being like pretty good at like probably better than France at tapping, better than France overall at gimmicky stuff, just gives them so many options in this pool. You don't have as much raw like aim mechanics. The closest thing to aim mechanics you have is like free mod 1, because no mod 1 is like a low AR map. So yeah, I don't think France has too many options. I imagine this is gonna be Canada 6-1, 6-2, maybe 6-3, but I wouldn't imagine more than that.
This France roster is like the epitome of a team that I feel like should be better than it is. Like they qualify 14th, and then they have like a really rough time in the first week of the bracket. Like they get 6-0'd, and they set some really not great scores when you consider the players that are on this team. Like it's so strange to me. The only map that they won in common, the teams got 13th and 14th on. Like, why is this France team not better, guys? I don't understand. Like, look at the names. Why is that team not better? Where's Okoro when you need him, huh? But yeah, Canada just wins this. I don't know. It's like 6-1, 6-2 at best. If unless France can figure out how to actually maximize the talent of the players on that team, which based on what we saw in qualifiers and last week is unfortunately not at this point in time seeming that likely. This is going to be a pretty one-sided one. I think Canada is just too strong. And again, it's like, I'm going late in, so it's just basically what everybody else has already said.
Yeah, I have really nothing else to say, and I'm just going to complete the 5-way, and we're going to all vote Canada for this. So if France wins, this is a hot screenshot, hot Twitter screenshot, flaming hot, like, but yeah, we're gonna that's going to round out our losers bracket matches here. We're going to be moving on to the winners bracket in just a second and finishing this 5-way. We're going to open with another 5-way to my knowledge because I think we're all voting South Korea here. Yeah. Ukraine did a really bang up performance, and I've said it before on stream, and I will say it again. And I will say 대한민국 만세, and I think that they're going to win the tournament, and I think they're going to win this match. So that's my moving on. T1G.
Yeah. Listen, I think if you pick against South Korea in literally any match in this tournament, you might need to get your head checked because this team is absolutely ludicrous. You look at the scores in qualifiers, you look at the scores last week, you look at the name worst HR player on their roster, and you just pick South Korea against literally anyone. The story of Ukraine over the last year or two in competitive play is a really cool one to me. Unfortunately, they might get a point or two, but it's South Korea.
Yeah, I'll say it again. Worst HR player last week got the best score in the entire tournament on 6 out of 7 maps played. South Korea are just an insanely strong team. I think Dench can carry them to 1 point, maybe. We hope. So I'll go 6-1. I just trust in Dench a little bit, you know?
So here's how Ukraine can win 1 point. You pick Nomad 3 and you put in Dench Roman Raf GPO. There is a single head-to-head win last weekend for Ukraine versus South Korea. That is on the free mod 1 last week. Most similar to that Nomad 3 this week. So yeah, I think they can win a point. But yeah, Korea's winning the match. You thought.
No, I don't think anybody thought. You tried. I'll give you credit for the effort.
To be fair, I actually do think that Ukraine can win a point, but I don't think it would be on the Nomad 3. I think South Korea would crush Nomad 3.
South Korea was 11th on the free mod 1 last weekend, and that's really similar in style. Worst HR player FC'd, but they double 600K'd for the other two members.
I think that was an instance of like probably the easiest map in the pool that they'd allurred on. I do think this Nomad 3 in this pool is a lot more gimmickier. It's a lot more like tech alt specialist, which I do think South Korea is going to be better on. I actually think Ukraine can win on a tapping map. Because if you look at, all of South Korea's skill sets, the only thing they're not like the best on is raw tapping. And I do think Ukraine has a good shot at winning one of the tapping maps just because of how good the tapping roster is on that team. But I do think that's where they're going to get their point if they get a point, which I do believe. I do think it's going to be a 6-1 to South Korea. Ukraine hopefully gets a dub on like Nomad 2 or Free Mod 2 or DT3. And then South Korea will just do South Korea things where a star player FCs every map in the world and then GG.
A lot of debate all to say Ukraine can get 1 point.
Yeah. I was saying the counterpoint to the tapping argument is that there are 2 bans. If the other really afraid, if South Korea is actually afraid of tapping,
it's 1 ban.
I thought it was.
It's 1 ban. It's 1 ban.
It's 1 ban.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought 2 bans started.
Sorry. Next week is 2 bans.
I'm pretty sure next week starts 2 bans. Wait, I'm a referee. Like I need to know this shit.
Yeah. Other counterpoint to the tapping argument is that, Ukraine was number 2 on DT2 in qualifiers. Their other run on DT2 in qualifiers was a whopping 1.4 million team score.
Was it their first or their second that they did that?
I don't have that up, actually.
Because I was going to say, if it was their
Um,
second, like, if somebody missed and they knew they couldn't replicate their first score, then you just, like, AFK the rest of the map. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I can't say
here.
specifics.
It's number 44, I think. Yeah, it was their second run, and Dench got 73% accuracy.
Yeah, there you go.
But regardless, they still would have only gotten, like, I don't know, 1.6, 1.8 mil, even if Dench had played the map out. So the consistency for the roster is lower than South Korea, who got within 30K score on both of their runs and were number 5 and 6 overall. They also win the head-to-head on DT1 from last weekend. They have just better head-to-head on most tapping maps, actually, throughout both pools. And Ukraine didn't actually get to, like, pick a lot of the tapping last weekend. They were number 5 on DT2, but they got blasted on DT1. It's a 600k score diff for South Korea. So I don't know. We'll see what they want to go with for actually winning a point. I think it's possible for them to win a point on tapping, clearly, because they got the number 2 score on DT2 in qualifiers. It's possible, but I don't know. It's gonna be hard one way or another.
I can't believe the hottest debate of this match is whether or not Ukraine is going to get a single point.
Are they
And
picking
it's
tapping or are they
maybe
picking gimmick?
win
Come
on
on, man.
That's like the hottest debate. But yeah, that's going to be at Saturday 15 UTC.
Nice.
And we're going to be
Is that first
we're going to
match
be
of the
going
week?
on to the next match, which is going to be Brazil versus Germany.
7-1. Excuse me. Sorry. Something in my throat.
It's first of all, sir,
I know,
it's best
I
of
know,
11, one
I
ban.
know.
Get out of here. We can do that. Jesus Christ.
I know it's best
you
of
are
11. It's just whenever
Had to
these
get it
two
in there.
countries match up against each other.
Yeah, Brazil, Germany. 7-1, obviously.
Yeah. And the best of 11, 7-1.
She doesn't know.
Okay,
Who doesn't
I
know?
don't. I mean, I probably do, but I would have to like be re-educated. Aaron, why don't you start us off on this one?
Yeah, this is actually kind of interesting. So you had both teams with like pretty quality wins last week. You have both teams with some pretty decent scores last week. As I'm, you have like a super one-sided couple maps. Like you have Nomad 2 that was like 1,000,000 points. Then you have Brazil winning a couple maps. I feel like if it were OWC, right, this would be so easy because it would just be Germany and it would be like not close. But Brazil put together a really strong roster for this tournament this year. Oh man, I hate going first.
Yeah, this is for context. This is seed 4 versus seed 5.
I mean, this is 4 and
in
5.
winners
Like
bracket,
this is
so-
like this is really really competitive in terms of like everything you can be competitive in terms of. I think I have a hard time picking against Germany. I'm going to hesitantly say Germany, but I don't feel super strongly about being able to pick either team to win this because what is it, 2-2, I think, in
Yeah, it's
compared
2-2 head to head
scores.
last weekend.
Yeah, it's 2-2 in compared scores, and that's like number 1 and number 10 on a map versus number 6 and 7, number 6 and number 9, and then number 1 and number 3. Like very,
they're all
very
pretty
solid
close.
scores. Yeah, they're all really close. They're all very solid. I think this is a match that could be determined on just like intangibles, like one player popping off on a couple maps here and there. Somebody, and the person that I would say that has the highest likelihood of that happening for is Kriller, right? I think it's fair to say that at this point, Kriller's the best player between these two teams in this matchup. And in a match this close, that could be all that ends up mattering is, does one person put on their carry pants and do it? And I think I would expect out of anyone, as I said, in this match to do that, I would expect it to be Kriller. I'm going to say Germany. I'm going to say like tiebreaker. Like this is like 6-5 Germany.
Yeah, this is such a tough one. To me, this is the closest match of the weekend. I was looking at the qualifier results. I looked at the match scores from last week, and it was not helpful in the slightest. I do feel like Brazil has a more well-rounded roster, whereas Germany feels much more like the curler team. And it's very tough. They had a lot of similar scores. I'm not sure how much this pool favors either team. Both of these teams had maps they did very poorly on last week, and some maps they did very well on. And I actually wrote down for my prediction 6-5 for Brazil, but I've had more time to think about it throughout the episode, and I just can't bet against Kriller. So I'm gonna have to go 6-5 Germany. I think Kriller did struggle on a couple maps last week, but it was against one of the lower seeded teams, right? I imagine Kriller's going to be taking this one a lot more seriously. We know Kriller is one of the best tournament players, not just in OWC, but in the world. And I think the big question to me is the pool going to be hard enough that Kriller can carry, or is it still easy enough that the well-roundedness of Brazil will fail? And I think if it does come down to tiebreaker, Kriller will probably give Germany the edge there, and which is why I'm going to give it to them 6-5.
Yeah, I think that, like Aaron said earlier, I'm not super for or against any team. I think that a lot of the carry potential does lie on Kriller versus like, can he go against the core members of Brazil? And I kind of, in this case, in this very specific case, I believe in the power of numbers. And I think that having that core roster for Brazil does favor them. So I think I'm gonna go Brazil with this one. I don't feel like I'm not super like gung ho, but I just think that Korean Nissan and Misty, like when they care, like they will show up and they will fucking perform.
As
And
somebody said in Twitch chat, if this was like 3 or 4 years ago, this Brazil team gets to grand finals.
yeah, I mean, I still, deep down in my heart, inhaling copium, like like the person that I am, I believe that they can win. I believe that they will show up. I do think like someone that isn't really talked about is Fle and Chark on the German team, and they definitely can support Kriller in some regard. Kriller is an amazing player, not just for this tournament for 3 digits, but in the entire world, like iFlame said. But I just don't think the pool is hard enough that Kriller can, do the 1v3 that he's been doing in other tournaments. So yeah, that's my prediction. I'm gonna go. I'll go tiebreaker. I'll go tiebreaker, but Brazil wins it. All right, Dio, if you.
Sure, I'll go next. Yeah, I wanted to say a lot of the same things. I think, yeah, if you're gonna point out a particular carry on either team, I think you're gonna point to Kriller. But it's the second round of the tournament. Like, this is still early stage. One person carrying does not oftentimes have enough impact to completely flip the tides. Definitely in a 3v3, it's more impactful than a 4v4. I'll give you that. But I still think a core roster with a few really good people is going to be better than a core roster with one of the best players in the world and a few good people. Obviously, the players on Germany are all really good. Fle, Pear, and Shark last week looked great alongside Kriller. They all set a lot of really good scores. But I think just looking at qualifiers and round of 16 overall, how good Zubs, Defons, and Korea Maluko all looked was really, really strong as a core. They had a pretty bad time on the Nomad 2 last weekend, but they had better scores on Hard Rock in both qualifiers and round of 16, better scores on DT in both qualifiers and round of 16, except for the DT1 in qualifiers. That's the one DT map that Germany ever got a better score than Brazil on. And even then, that was only one of their 2 runs. Both of Brazil's runs were better than the first run from Germany. Only their second run was better than Brazil's scores. So the consistency is there for Brazil on these DT maps. They're just straight up better on the Hard Rocks as well. And I think with an expanded DT pool, with all 3 DTs being more speed focused this week, as opposed to the 300 BPM Taylor Swift map from last week, and with a lot of the like toss up picks being pretty close between the teams, I'm gonna favor the team that has a more solid core of 3 players who can go in on most anything and just sub out when needed, especially in these earlier stages. And I wanted to bring the attention because I know like Nissan and Mistia get a lot of attention put on them, but they're no longer the carries for this team. It's Korea Maluko, Zubs, and Defons who are the carries for this team, and those are the players that I'm going to be looking at this weekend to really pop off for Brazil.
Yeah, I think when I first looked at this matchup, I was leaning to Brazil. They have a lot of close scores and qualities, but I was like, oh, Brazil has that Hard Rock advantage. They played really well on the Hard Rocks. They also look really good on the DTs because I saw like the Germany 22 on DT2 and qualities, and I was like, well, I thought Germany was a good, like just always a good tapping country. But then looking at the qualities for Germany on DT2, it's like Kriller looked not warm at all, just based on his accuracy, and he played the tapping in round of 16 way better, like incomparably better. They also didn't put Shark on the DT2, which is like, I always think of Shark as like one of the Germany tapping core carries. And if you just compare the 2 out of the 3 of the tapping maps, notably the more stamina focused ones, Germany just looked a lot better. And then yeah, mainly on Fremont too. It's still close, but it's like, man, regardless, this is a close matchup. This is like 6-4, 6-5. I still think in my heart of heart that having a player like Kriller does matter. Kriller, I think, was, even when you compare it to both the Germany and Brazil team, the best overall performer. I think it's going to happen again. And while I do think the full roster on Brazil is fantastic, and I think they'll have plenty of picks to go for, I want to give the slight edge to Germany overall. I think it'll be super close. I think it could go either way. Like this is the closest matchup. I agree.
Yeah, I wanted to add as well. I don't think you can frame the match as Kriller against the core of Brazil, right? Germany is the 5th seed for a reason. They have solid support, especially players like Pear and Flay. Pear was 2nd on the free mod 2 last week. Flay was 6th on the free mod 2. Like some of these supporting players on Germany have put up very good scores themselves, and so Kriller will have that support that he can rely on. It's not just a 1v3. And I think that kind of boost from Kriller being so good is going to be enough to push them over the edge and get them the win.
All right. I think this is definitely a match that we have to keep a close eye on. I think our general consensus across the board is that it'll probably 6-4 to 6-5. But
It's close.
It's
yeah, it's
close.
definitely close for sure. Both of these teams are really, really good and, unfortunately matched up this early on. But we're going to be moving on to our next winner's bracket match. That is going to be the United States versus Sweden. That's going to be
Ooh.
Saturday at 20 UTC. Despite their hiccups last week, I still have faith that the United States will come through with their full roster.
Cough,
And
cough.
Cough.
cough, their full roster, cough. And I think that, they will learn from their mistakes last week and that, having every single member there and warm is the most important thing. So I will go the United States. I will vote for the United States. I think it'll still be close because Skilla is kind of OP. So I think it'll go 6-3. I'll put 6-3 Sweden.
Really?
Oh, sorry, 6-3 United States. Oh my god, what am I saying?
All right. Just making sure.
My bad. All right, Aaron, why don't you go next?
Yeah. I mean, there is not a real case where USA should ever lose a matchup like this. Obviously, we've done the discussion to death about what happened versus Chile with Taquito not being there and Chile playing out of their minds that match. But I don't really see how Sweden gets 6 points against them. I think definitely there's a world where this is another kind of competitive close match, much like USA had against Chile. But as Kay said, if USA has their full roster, shows up and takes it seriously and is prepped and ready to go, there's no reason they can't recreate the score that happened in OWC when they faced off there, which was 6-1 United States. Obviously, and there's even half the players in this match, if not more, in common, because you've got Taquito, Bashi, Kama, all from the USA OWC team, and Skilla, Yagiko, Trumpetino, maybe Spinks
also, yeah.
All were on the Sweden OWC team, so a lot of players in common. Obviously, this is a stage earlier in a tournament, a tier down in terms of the expected map goal difficulty and all that, so you can't directly compare it, but I think the United States just has the better players. I think Sweden can make it a competitive one, 6-2, 6-3, but assuming that USA has their full roster and is prepped and ready to go and warmed up and all that jazz, USA wins this pretty handily.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I mean, like you guys said, the US should be one of the best teams in the tournament. On paper, they shouldn't have too much trouble with most teams. And I do think Sweden has played well enough that they're going to be able to take 1 or 2 points. USA should be far and away the better team, and I'm going to give it to them 6-2.
This match is on a Saturday. Last weekend, the United States match was on a Friday night. Because this is Saturday in the afternoon, I am going to give it to United States. If it were Sunday 15 UTC, I would be giving it to Sweden. And if it were Friday 1 UTC, as it was versus Chile, I would be giving it to Sweden. But I think that because it is Saturday 20 UTC, the United States will have their full team there ready to go. And in a world where that's the case, I don't think they ever lose. Just like how in qualifiers, there was a massive difference between this team and Sweden. USA was number 2 out of qualifiers. They were pretty much universally the number 2 team coming into the tournament. When we were looking at rosters on the tier list on the 3WC channel, pretty much everybody was like, yeah, South Korea number 1, USA number 2. We had unanimous agreement on the placement for those two teams in the tournament overall. I still think that's going to be the case. I still think winners finals is extremely likely to be United States versus South Korea. So I'm still going to put United States. But yeah, I don't know. I just hate that every early stage in every country-based tournament where you have, well, just USA, OWC, and 3WC, really. Because, like, 4-digit World Cup is too low for there to be significant overlap for the United States team. But every 3WC, every OWC, you always get this USA early stage bullshit where they just troll their first match. Like, are we not sick and goddamn tired of this already? Like, the hell, man?
Yeah. What I think USA needs.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I just can't. I just can't take it seriously anymore. Like, stop the bullshit.
I don't know what USA was doing back in 2019 where they all got in that just grind set of like, we're winning this tournament without dropping a single fucking point. But they need to get back to that because it was a lot less like annoying, for want of a better word, to have to deal with as like somebody who is and always has been a USA fan. Like, for all of the shit that I've talked about USA teams, like, I have always been a fan of their teams and supported their rosters. But like, man, please, whatever you were doing like 4 or 5 years ago when you were taking every stage seriously and trying super hard and wanting to be the best team and not lose a single map, go back to that, because that was a lot better for you.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you guys considered that the match is at 20 UTC, and if you're in Alaska, that's 11 a.m., which we all know is the worst time to play?
In Alaska.
Oh, great no. 11 a.m. match.
Alaskan gamers.
Amazing 11 a.m. tourney match.
Amazing 11 a.m. tourney match.
Anyway.
I mean, to be fair, I think even if Taquito didn't show up again, I would still put USA to win, just because there's a few like really nutty scores from the United States roster on this round of 16, like Hard Rock 2 almost doubling Sweden with a 2.6 million on one of the hardest maps to be consistent on in that pool. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, I mean, lots of good scores overall. Sweden is, I think, a surprisingly powerful team. Like, you have Skilla, who's really, really good, and a really good backing roster, but I don't think they're going to do the same thing again. I think everybody's going to be there, or at least Taquito will be there, which I think will make them a lot better on the tapping maps, because we're really missing a good third in the tapping maps. And then I think it'll be USA. If they're all ready and like prepared, I think this is like USA, like a pretty, like a 6-1, like, or maybe even 6-0. Like, I think USA has really, really good depth if they're all ready. So if they're all ready, I don't think this is a close match at all.
Yeah, agreed. I'd put like 6-1, assuming they're actually like good to go.
We have to make so many assumptions. I don't like having to make assumptions. Like, South Korea, I'm not making any assumptions. I just know they're that good.
I just know they're winning, and it's like 6-1, 6-0.
You know?
But USA, it's like we have to assume that they're gonna have everybody there. We have to assume that they're gonna be playing. And
how do I do my pick'ems, Team USA? Come on, man.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're 5-0 USA.
Yeah, 5-0 USA. And you know, we were like that last week. We're like that this week. And moving on to our last match of the bracket, the last match that we are going over on this podcast, we have Hong Kong versus the Philippines, and I don't know what I want to vote yet, so I'm going to give it to Vorty.
Ooh, just go to the other end so you can be last.
All the way, just Hyok to a 4-4 Nathan Ram supremacy, dude, I believe. But actually, I mean, my serious answer isn't even far away from that. I do think like getting 2nd and 4th overall in the round of 16 is pretty insane. And I do think if this was like a 4v4 tournament and you had 2 hyper carries and then your other 2 players weren't as good, it would be pretty bad. But in a 3v3, I think having two insane players, like in a lot of situations, is just going to be enough as long as the third can get a decent supporting score, like even 300, 400, maybe 500k. Ramu, I think on the maps that they can play, is actually a pretty solid third player. So I do think Philippines is probably just going to pick into the maps where they'll have those three, and then a lot of the other maps will have at least two really, really good scores. And I do think on a harder pool, having two really, really insane players is really good. I think Hong Kong has like a better overall roster when you get past the carries. You also have Suwagi, who's a fantastic, like high level tournament player. And I still think this is also another close one. I think this is another one that is like in the vein of Germany, Brazil, where I do think it'll be pretty close. I can see the sides for both, but I think overall Philippines. I mean, even if you look at the Philippines had a few maps where they did have like really good. They're like Impouster on No Mod 1. Like I think there's a few skill sets where they don't have a third. But the ones where they do, I think Philippines is just like incredible. I also do think it's poetic that they got number 1 on PH. Like that's just the universe making things right. But yeah, I think overall this is
They're
Philippines.
like, we have to play PH and we have to three-way it for the content.
I think it's maybe like 6-3, 6-4 Philippines.
All right, I guess I'm up. I kind of agree, actually. I think if you look at the qualifier scores for both of these teams, it's honestly really like kind of baffling how Philippines got so low of a qualifier result in comparison to Hong Kong, right? They were 3 versus 6 in qualifiers. I think a lot of that is the DT pool for Philippines, where they were 22 and 20 overall on the DT pool, but they were 5, 6, 3, 7 on the no mods, 2 and 6 on the hiddens, and then number 5 on Hard Rock 1, number 16 on Hard Rock 2. And all of those are really competitive, if not better than the scores from Hong Kong. And then last week in round of 16, if you look at head-to-head maps, one of those goes to Hong Kong, and 3 of them go to Philippines. And even if you look at the maps that are outside the head-to-head, on the DT pool where you expect it, on DT1, Philippines had a rough score. They were number 7. And then every other map is like top 3 for both of these teams. I think literally every map where they weren't head-to-head, both teams were top 3 on the map, except for DT1 for Philippines. So with both teams putting up extremely good scores, and the head-to-head favoring Philippines with those good scores taken into account, and neither of these teams really wanting to play DT. Like, you look at the DT scores for Hong Kong in qualifiers, Philippines actually had a better DT1 score on their best run. And then on DT2, Hong Kong had 2 better scores than both the Philippines, but they had like 94, 95 AC for Suwagi as their third player. On their run that was submitted, it was a choke at the end for F2X and an FC for Max Birio, but Suwagi got 380k with 94 AC. Like, they are clearly getting third playered on this kind of stuff. So if they're not super comfortable with the skill set, they probably don't want to pick into it all that much, especially if Philippines can maybe throw together a slightly better roster on some of these speed maps in this pool. Again, the speed maps in this pool are far less about the long stream 230 BPM stamina like the DT2 in qualifiers. You can maybe ban out the Nomad 2 if you're Philippines this week, and then be pretty fine on the DT2, DT3, and maybe DT1 if they're well practiced, though I think that's just a Hong Kong map, honestly. I think they're just going to lose that one. I think it's still close, but I think it's Philippines favored.
It's definitely going to be a close one, one way or the other. Obviously, Hyuk and Nathan Ram played incredibly well last week. But on the side of Hong Kong, there was also Xi'an, who was third individual last week. To me, I would say Suwagi had a bit of an off week last week, but is probably a top 5 player in the tournament. And I don't necessarily think the pool favors either team heavily. And even just looking at last week, both teams had incredible team scores across the board. Like you said, Dio, they were pretty much top 3 in most things they played on both sides. To me, what it's going to come down to is that third player. I do agree, it feels like there are a couple maps that Hong Kong might be third playered on, but it felt like Philippines was third playered on nearly everything except for a couple maps. Against a lot of teams, that's going to be fine, and Nathan Ram and Tiok are going to be able to carry that anyways. But if Xian can keep up the performance, Suwagi can match Hyok most of the time. And so I think there's going to be a slight edge to Hong Kong. I would probably give it to them 6-4. I could see it going to tiebreaker as well. But I would give Hong Kong the edge here. I think they have been more consistent. And while normally the third player syndrome doesn't matter as much in the early round, I think when both of your carries can be matched by carries on the other team, it's going to hurt a lot more. And it ultimately is going to come down to whether Sawagi can match Hyok. If Sawagi has a performance like last week, Philippines, like you guys said, are going to take it pretty easily. But if we see Sawagi get back to the usual form, play like, top 5 player in the tournament, like he often can, then I think Hong Kong has the edge.
The Suwagi thing is so interesting to me because he went in map pool feedback and said, "I'm skill capped" a couple days ago, which I somehow doubt. I feel that is probably not true.
That's mental mind games.
Yeah, it's mind games.
Deception.
Yeah, it's actually mind games. No, this is like I find though, like you guys were talking about. This is a really interesting matchup because to me it feels like it's like a 2v2 and then a 1v1, right? Because you have Hyok and Nathan Ram versus whoever the two best performers are for Hong Kong on a given map, and then like who gets third playered less, assuming that those two are like somewhat similar.
I mean, easily Hong Kong.
What's that?
Easily Hong Kong.
Right, and like Hong Kong probably gets third playered less. So then the assumption becomes, the question becomes, can the 2v2 be won by Hong Kong, or will Philippines, with their two carries being as good as they are, can those two players like outdo, whatever like maybe weaker third player they have in for things? For me, I still want to have some faith in Philippines, but I think this is definitely another one. Like all these quarterfinals are so contested, right? I'm still going to pick Philippines here because I'm putting my faith in the Nathan Ram and Hyok bucket. I think those two are performing at such a ludicrously high level that it's going to be a very, very tough ask for Suwagi +1, presumably, to match them. Even if Hong Kong's third player does better than the Philippines' third player, I think that the Philippines' core 2 is just overwhelming at this stage of the tournament, and they're not, I don't think, going to be outshone by Hong Kong. This is one where that could go the other way very easily. If Suwagi plays at peak, Xian continues playing super well, and whoever a third is for any map for Hong Kong fills adequately, then definitely it's a matchup that Hong Kong can win. But I think the likely outcome is Philippines, and in a close one, again, like 6-4 or even tiebreaker scenario.
Ooh, okay. So this is what happened last week, right? We thought that Russia was gonna win and that it was gonna be kind of close. And iFlame voted for the country that. So if I vote Philippines, then it'll be like 2 on either side, and then iFlame in the middle voting Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong ended up winning. Or sorry, not Hong Kong. Sweden ended up winning, right? Because we voted Russia. Like 4 of us voted Russia, and then iFlame voted Sweden. So, in my heart, I know that Nathan Ram and Hyuk are like absolutely god tier tournament players, but for the sole reason that last week was Lunar New Year and Hong Kong still showed up and 6-0'd, okay? Hear me out. You have a national holiday, a cultural holiday, whatever you want to call it, right? You showed up and you 6-0'd, and then surely any run-of-the-mill week you should be able to also do that, right? Like theoretically. The math is not mathing, and I know it doesn't make any sense, but
yeah, this is like some Osu astrology.
Math not mathing is our specialty here at Full Circle. What else is new, eh?
Yeah, so based on the sole fact that, I'm not repeating the Russia situation, and last week was Lunar New Year, I'm going Hong Kong.
It's the
Let's
star
go.
signs, guys. The
It's
stars
the
say
star
Hong Kong will
sign.
win.
All right.
They're all Sagittariuses, I think.
Yeah, if
They're
Mercury
good
is in
winners.
retrograde, so Augie gets a buff and he just wins.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens.
Oh goodness gracious. Oh, but yeah, I think that either way, this match is gonna be super close. Um, but yeah, like 13 UTC, I believe that opens up the weekend. Oh no, sorry,
It's
that's
13 UTC
Sunday. 13
Sunday,
UTC.
yeah.
Yeah,
The first match of the
sorry.
weekend is tomorrow 15, which is
Yeah, first
this is
that's
a
gonna be
double.
Indonesia versus Poland, I
Yeah.
think.
It's Indonesia, Poland,
Or
and South Korea, Ukraine.
oh my. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think, man, this week in general just has some really close matchups. It's really hard to decide. But either way, thank you guys all for joining us. Thank you to all the viewers. Thank you to iFlame, Dio, T1G, and Vordy for joining me for predictions and on this podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Cavu for streaming. This has been Full Circle. I've been Kay, and we will see you